Welcome to another edition of Women's Wrestling Weekly, post 2025 Women's Nationals edition, along with Scott D. Beck. I am still in Spokane, Scott Beck in New York City. Two words, Scott. Audrey Jimenez, she was the class of the field, doesn't surrender a point on her way to the U20 World Team. It was the field of fields, 50 kilograms, watching her blitz through. Hadn't seen her since the Olympic trials, and she looks sharp as ever. What were your thoughts on Audrey Jimenez watching from home?
I mean, she looked phenomenal, and you and I say many times there are levels to this stuff, and you saw the levels, right? We didn't know what Turner was. She wrestles, Kroll loses, and Jimenez just destroys her. We saw, Jocelyn Bazakis, winning U17s, go up to U20s, take losses. So there's levels to this, and by far, in my opinion, the class of the field was Jimenez, and there wasn't a distant set. The second was distant, and she's a serious contender to make a senior world team. The other one I would say, we always use the word prodigy. We use the word, phenom. Taina Fernandez blitz through the field in U17s, and I think she would blitz through the field in U20s and maybe even U23s. So probably U23s, to be honest with you. So
When it comes to Audrey Jimenez, it probably is the person that we have to say is the front runner at 50 kilograms. Sage Mortimer has entered into the U.S. Open. She's moved up. I would assume it's going to be a long-term play that she's going to be at a different weight class. But with Sage Mortimer out of the field, now you have Aaron Golston, you have Emily Shilson in the field. So those three seem to be the three that are separated right now at the senior level. But I think just based on what we've seen from Audrey Jimenez in the past, making the Olympic trials finals, has been there in Final X, I have to think she's the front runner right now at 50 kilos senior wise.
yeah, I'd say right now she definitely is a front runner. And to be honest with you, I think Mortimer would move it up to 53, especially if that's a play for the cycle. She's big for 50, and I think the cut would be a lot. I think 53 is a good weight for her. And yeah, I mean, I think Aaron Goldston is capable of beating Jimenez, for sure. But right now, I'd have to give the favorite label to Jimenez. She looked very good.
Scott, I got to say you're right. Taina Fernandez looked sharp, but she gave up a couple points in exactly the way that you said she would. Just kind of a quirky step out where they were having action go out of bounds, and she gave up a step out point. But top to bottom, Taina Fernandez really looked sharp.
Yeah, and she gave a point, I think, in two different matches. I'm happy she gave a point. Couldn't care less. She wrestled great, was aggressive, attacked, not remotely tested at all. But I like her style, and she opens it up. And the fact that she did it doesn't mean anything. But we're gonna see a lot of her as long as she's healthy.
Watching Taina Fernandez like we have, it seems like the better the competition, the better she looks. I think a lot of times when I don't want to say inferior competition, but maybe the age level competition, when she reaches that higher level, when she's wrestling against senior competition, her level does go up and you see a noticeable change in how she's able to shift and how she's able to approach technique. And I think that's just the mark of someone who's going to grow into this and be a good senior.
Yeah, you can't like it's very hard to judge somebody against people they kill to begin with, right? They're not challenged, just the way people respond. And I'm not trying to take things away from any of her opponents because many of them are very good, but she's at a different level. And let's clear the field too with the discussion. Jimenez has already been in the Olympic trial finals, right? But let's take Turner is a U17, and she's not a prodigy yet. Maybe she'll become one at some point, but let's not start putting her and lumping her in this next level. We're not lumping Bazakis there either. They wrestled like very good U17 wrestlers that are adjusting to the next jump in competition. And Fernandez is at any level of competition. So I think there's tiers to this as well.
But let's just break that down. Who has been a prodigy in the United States? Amit Elor definitely is
Yes.
one. So you have the credentials there of what she's been able to accomplish.
Perhaps Kenny Blades,
Kennedy Blades,
maybe,
yeah. I mean, Kylie Welker makes the Olympic trials finals as a
yes.
teenager. That's in the mix. Tatiana Suarez gets world medals in her teenage
Helen
years.
was Helen was probably, I mean, she made world teams at young ages and medaled in all of them, age group world champ. I mean, listen, Vicky Anthony was a multiple age group, junior world champion, and then really, made senior world teams, but didn't medal. So, I mean, the label prodigy is a very serious label that we should not just go around, throwing around very lightly, and I don't think it's fair to the athletes. I can't stand that label being thrown around, and it puts a lot of pressure on them. And there's also physical maturity. You could be great, have great technique in an age group, and all of a sudden it is physical. I would say that the Crow match with Turner, Crow's just more physical. And I felt the same way where when Bazakis wrestled, when she lost, it's just physical. It's Jimenez. It's just manhandled, right?
Another takeaway as it relates to 50 kilograms is 103 is not the same as 110. And you saw some of those girls come in there and attempt to go up to 50 kilograms when they're 103 pounders. Of course, 50 kilograms is about 110 pounds. But that's a big jump when you're that little to go from 103 to 110. Kudos to Gabby Tedesco. She got third place at 50 kilograms in the U20 division. But it's tough to make that jump up 7 pounds when you're that light.
Yeah, of course, it's a bigger percent, and it's material. It really is. So that's not necessarily a good measuring stick either. If you don't have if the lowest weight class is really not the right size for these young ladies, for sure. And I think thematically, Kyle, the other thing I think we saw across divisions. I mean, you had a situation where Williams won 57, I think it was, in U23s and didn't do as well as U20s. I forget the place, maybe sixth place. U20s. I don't know if she wrestled the backside or not, but like there was just some inconsistencies. There were some strong weights at U23s, and there were some weights that were just not as solid. So this was a confusing tournament to me.
You can't lump it all as in one. You have 30 weight classes where you have champions. Of course, everything's going to be a little bit different. 50 kilograms was the class of the field in U17 and U23 and U20. That was the one that stood out. So it's just like anything, any college tournament, you're going to get some quality competition. You're going to get weight classes that are going to kind of spread out a little bit. You're going to be 16 deep, and then some you're going to maybe be 4 deep. So that's just the way I felt, that it was hard to just narrow one weight class down and just say this weight class is the ultimate, which I think 50 kilograms was the ultimate. But across the board, it was just different for every weight class, and I think you have to judge it that way.
I have a hard time if somebody just does a smell test and looks at the brackets, right? And then you see Cecilia Williams wins U23s at 57 kilos. So that's U23s is considered senior, not senior unlimited, but it's a senior division. And if you look at the world championship tournament, there are absolute hammers there. There's Olympians there, there's world champs, Olympic medalists. And then, she goes and takes seventh place. It was. I just looked, U20s, it's the same weight class. I don't know how to explain that. It's perplexing to me. Okay. Also, U20s was after U23s. It could be injuries. You could be fatigued. I don't know, but just looking at those results, it's confusing to me.
It is, and a lot of times you have special circumstances where you talk about that weight, but then you go to 55 kilograms. We finally got the finals matchup we'd been looking for with Cristelle Rodriguez and Amani Jones. Credentialed Amani Jones, two-time age level world bronze medalist. Cristelle Rodriguez, U20 world champion. Both national champions, two-time national champions in separate divisions, NAIA versus NCAA. We wanted to see that at some point during the season. We didn't get it in college, but here we got it in the U23 national finals, best of three. We got two matches. Cristelle Rodriguez just a little bit better than Amani Jones at this point.
Yeah, I mean it was a great match. I loved watching them wrestle, and it was tactical. And in my opinion, it was very well planned and very well coached. Rodriguez, Amani Jones twice went for the inside trip with the right leg off the Russian 2-on-1, and Rodriguez was very aware of that, stepped her left foot back and avoided it multiple times. And she won a fundamental. She kept out of Amani Jones' scrambling positions, scored in short offense, head in the hole, kind of front headlock stuff on go behinds. and then a number of times scored on gut wrenches. So I think it was very well wrestled, obviously by Rodriguez. It's hard for me to believe that that wasn't well coached and playing tactically. And there was some, the formula to beat Jones was kind of shown, in a great game plan, great match.
That is one,
Match is.
yeah, and that was one of the interesting things being on the ground at the mat side is because they change corners each time. You got to hear the advice from different coaches and how they approach the matches. And in particular, with the Zoe Lentz match against Jordan Faust, Jody Strittmatter was in the corner. In the second match, he kept yelling, no underhooks, no underhooks the entire time because he knew Zoe Lentz was so good from that headlock and good from an overhook. So you just got to hear the advice you got from one corner, and then when they switched out, you got to hear the advice from the opposite corner, how they were going to try to beat them tactically. So it was interesting to hear them go back and forth.
Yeah, and it was a very good adjustment. I mean, she won the next two matches, and that was a great. She was pushing in on a double, and it was a great headlock in the first match by Lenz, and she stuck her, and good adjustments. Yeah, so I mean, you never want to sit there and say, "Oh, the coach won the match for an athlete." Clearly, the athlete wrestled the match, but good coaching and good tactics can make a lot of difference.
And this was a big match win for Jordan Faust to get. She's dealt with some concussions. She had a situation where she actually quit the season early because of some health problems. And then she comes in, goes to 68 kilos. She had been down a bit before that, and 68 kilos is about 150 pounds, and comes in and makes a U20 world team. So a story of resilience with Jordan Faust. So you really have to congratulate her on staying tough and having the courage to go out there and win an impressive tournament.
Yeah, good job by her for sure. And those were exciting. Those were good matches. They were competitive. I like the way Lens wrestles, and I think we'll see more of her as well. I'm sure it's very tough. Winning the first one and losing the next is not fun. But you gotta learn from it and grow.
The three people that stood out to me, Audrey Jimenez, Taina Fernandez, and Everest Leydecker. I thought Everest Leydecker looked about as good as anyone in this tournament. She just kind of worked her way through, looked so good in the finals. I think so highly of Claire Bowie, and she really dominated that. Claire Bowie kind of moving up in weight. It was 55 kilograms. Claire Bowie wrestled 117 in the college season, so 55 kilograms is about 123, so moving up about 6 pounds. But I thought Everest Leydecker showed that she can be a contender for a world medal at the U20 World Championships.
Yeah, absolutely. And she looked really good. And she's got a nasty leg lace, which we saw in the first match. And then, she's good on her feet. She's disciplined. She's a very good wrestler. And last year when she went up, this is age, experience, and maturity, right? So last year she made U17 team, I believe, and then lost to Qureshi up at the U20 finals, right? And then this year, up at U20s, she took care of business. So, yeah, I think she's got a very good shot to medal, and she looked great.
World champion against world champion in Jasmine Robinson and Piper Fowler. It was won in straight matches by Jasmine Robinson. You know, every time she steps on the mat, there's that potential for the ooh and ah throw, and she had a couple throughout the tournament. I felt like by the time she got to that U20 best of three finals, she was pretty beat up because she had won the U23 national championship. And then she's got to go through another tournament the next day. So that's a lot of matches on the body to come out and win both tournaments. So you got to give credit to Jasmine Robinson for winning a pair of titles.
Yeah, and she's wrestling Piper Fowler, who's a U17 world champ, I believe. And that match, you could see, she was injured. There was a lot of stoppages. It was the tempo of the match sucked because, there's stoppage, but you could see she was banged up. But she, fought through it. I thought Fowler was game and, represented herself very well and did a good job. But just Robinson's a little bit too much at this time.
And you want to talk about a situation where you can be this close to making a world team and it slips away. Abby Cooper stayed tough. She lost the first match at 53 kilograms. Won in the second match 5-5, was actually down and got the deciding point for criteria in the second match, and then dominates and gets a tech fall in the third. So if you don't think it's that close, it's just a game of inches to win a match and make a world team. It can be in certain situations. And Abby Cooper proved that you have to stay positionally sound and stay through a match the entire time.
Yeah, and my heart goes out to Wasteman. It's tough when you win the first and then you lose the second and a heartbreaker to regroup for the third. We've seen it happen in three match series. It's really hard. I mean, because you're so close, and then you say, if I just finished this, I wouldn't be here. And mentally, you have to try to regroup. But we're talking. This is big stuff, making world teams, and it's hard. And in many cases, the person that loses the first wins a close second one, especially by coming back, usually wins a third. The momentum is shifted, and the other person's demoralized, and it's just it's my heart truly goes out to her, and we've been in that situation.
Because she did wrestle well. She did look good in that first one. Look good in
Yes.
the second one too. Just had a positional mistake and then it ends up just costing. Then you like you said, you got to regroup for that third one. That is so tough to do
You,
mentally.
you, yeah, and you also have the mental thing, which is very hard not to do, where you're like, especially if you're leading in the second. So you win the first, you're saying, okay, I just have to win the second one. I'm on the world team, right? And then all of a sudden, the match. Let's say you're leading, the match is getting closer. And then you start looking over the clock, and you're like, oh, 20 seconds. I just got to hold on, and you kind of start shifting from predator to prey. You're just trying to hold on and eke that out. And you're like, I have 10 more seconds, and I'm going to make the world team. And then sometimes you lose. And I always say, I've said this multiple times. I said it to my daughter once. Everybody that does the sport loses a match at some point in a horrible way. And if you watch enough wrestling, you see ways that matches get lost at the end of matches in ways that are borderline unfathomable. And I've said, like, I wish I could tell you it's never going to happen again, but I can't. It may. Like, this sport is a heartbreaker. It happens. Things happen. You try to learn from it and move on, but sometimes it's a lesson that you can't learn once it happens. And sometimes it's not a lesson. Sometimes somebody just beats you and it's a great move that you weren't ready for, or you did something right and they countered it right and you just lose. It sucks, but it's part of the game.
Naomi Simon makes another U20 world team. This is good for her because she's behind Kylie Welker, who's a one of the best. I mean, she's a
Yeah.
senior level, high level senior, and Naomi Simon's a high level U20. So she's in that area where if she's on any other college program, she's the number one, no doubt about it. So it's good to see Naomi Simon get another shot to shine in an age level division, and she looked good.
Yeah, she does look very good, and I completely agree. It's, being behind Walker is very difficult, and it's not happening right now. But, it's good. She'll get international experience, hopefully she'll contend, if not get a medal, and, trust me, getting beat up by Welker, in the room hardens her, for tournaments like this and the World Championship.
And you know going in that this is easier than what she has in the Iowa wrestling room with Kennedy Blades,
By
Macy
far.
Kilt. Yeah, I mean it's not even close. Like this is a break for her.
No, trust me. In practice, with my daughter, when she was in the Hawkeye Wrestling Club, and getting hammered every single day, by Allie Reagan, Kayla Miracle, and Forrest Molinari. Literally, it was like, fun to actually wrestle in the World Team U20 World Team Trials because you're just getting the piss beat out of you day and night.
Loriana Piestawa of Colorado Mesa. I know that Joe Norton had said some good things about her, that Colorado Mesa got a good one, and she proved it by coming through and making a world team. So if she wasn't on your radar before, making an age level world team is now.
Yeah, I'm gonna give full disclosure here. I didn't really know that much about her. And then all of a sudden I'm seeing her advancing through the bracket. I'm looking her up. She had a good college season, very good college season. She wrestled with Travis Mercado, who's a very good coach. So she's going to be good technically, and she was just impressive. I mean, I was very impressed, and she's on my radar now, as you said. Yes.
Aubrey Krazer should be on your radar too. She made a world, U20 world team and beat Bella Williams, who, I mean, look at how good of a tournament Bella Williams had. She makes the finals of two age level tournaments, U23 Nationals and U20 World Team Trials. Just awful close right there. But Aubrey Krazer, she's a hammer and she's just so solid and so physical. She kind of reminds me of your daughter a little bit.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, she looked very strong. Yeah, and she was very solid in positions. And Bella Williams took out Skaznicki, to make the finals of the U23. So she, looked, and Jamie had controlled both matches, but Williams, was in there and fighting. She didn't get blown out. The match was relatively close. So yeah, Frazier looked really good. And I do see similarities, in that style of wrestling. Just good stance, good positionally, keeps coming, methodically, just keeps building on her lead. I was very impressed. Yeah.
And keep in mind, Bella Williams still a high schooler. She's a senior in high school, so have to give her credit for making it to the finals. Had three finalists in the U23 division. You had Heather Kroll win a championship. You had Cecilia Williams win the championship. So you had three high schoolers make it to the finals, 2-1 titles. So that's an impressive thing to do at a senior level tournament.
To me, there were some weights that were very tough, some weren't as tough. There were, some high school girls that did very well, and some names that I wasn't as aware of that are, that are hitting the radar. So this is always a kind of a coming out party sometimes for certain names. Obviously we knew who Bella Williams was, and taking second twice is very good achievement, and she's a high schooler, but there were just solid performances. But it was not like necessarily a blowing away by the youth movement. I think the older age showed itself in experience and maturity a little bit in some of the matches.
Just finishing out the U20 division, Cadence Didick won the first match at 65 kilos in the U20 division, 5-2. Daniela Nugent comes back, wins 2-2, and then 6-4. She is still in high school, so she makes a world team. If you remember the name Marisol Nugent, of course, that's her
Absolutely.
sister, and she is on a world team. So I guess final thoughts on the U20 division. I have a few of my own, but if you have any that you want to share.
I'm really looking forward to seeing Jimenez, what she does, in the senior trials, and if she makes senior world teams and competes at the next level, that share yours.
Here's the one thing, please, Lehigh, will you add a Division One program? Here you have three U20 world teamers that are Lehigh representatives or will be going to Lehigh. You had Abby Cooper, Aubrey Krazer, and Audrey Jimenez. It would be a shame if you just let them go in the club system and don't go Division One. This is what we've been begging for, a team that can compete and get in there, mix it up with those top schools. Lehigh, start Division One women's wrestling. We need it.
Yeah, great point, Kyle, for sure.
When we go to the U23 division, it was fun to see the NAIA versus NCAA matchups. We alluded to that a little bit at 123 pounds or 55 kilograms with Amani Jones and Cristelle Rodriguez. But we also had another one between national champions. You had Katie Lang, who was a national champion for Augsburg, then goes to Grand Valley State, wrestles Adugo Wachukwu, who still had eligibility if she wanted to, but went to the WCAP program. She was a three-time national champion, two for Iowa Wesleyan. They closed the school and then won a title for William Penn. Adugo Wachukwu does what she does. She's hard to score on, and when she explodes, it is as awe-inspiring as any wrestler you're going to see in the business.
Yeah, I mean, those matches were very, competitive. Lang is a strong competitor, never gives up, and they were really close. Do go look at throughout the tournament, but so did Lang. Those were good matches to see. And then, you know, Bella Williams, won Macomb upset Reese Larramendi, and then Bella Williams, made a world team. Which was good to see her finally win one of these. I've seen her compete in a lot of these tournaments, advance far, and I'd like to see her international competition.
Tristan Kelly and Brooklyn Hayes were on the NCAA side, so if you're making a count, it's 2-2. NCAA had two in the finals for wins, and you had NAI two for wins. And that's the interesting thing about the U23 Nationals is it's an impressive tournament to win, but you don't know what people are thinking. A lot could be thinking, I'm going to go to the U.S. Open, I'm going to get my spot on the ladder, and I'm going to make my team that way. So this is the strangest of strange tournaments because it's a legit national championship. You do get a lot of good competition, but a lot of them are probably just waiting and saying, I'll see you at U.S. Open in Vegas.
Yeah, you don't really know how to feel about it. There are some weights that there have been in the past, at least, weights where the top three were way older than 23 years old, and nobody sniffed it at the U.S. Open. And whoever won here made the team. And there have been weights where the top 2 or 3 are, young. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. It's kind of a little bittersweet. It's nice, I would like to see a true U23 World Team Trials. They used to have it, and then they went to this format. I just don't think it's not knowing, and if, it's another trip to go. If you're 23 years old, you want to spend the money and time, and it's kind of tight to where the U.S. Open is. But then if you would have, if you would have won and you didn't go, or you have a bad U.S. Open, I don't love that non-clarity. We're talking about making world teams. So I'd like to see it defined a little better.
Let's hop to the U17 division. Just anything that stands out to you. My standout was Ella Paulillo, in addition to Taina Fernandez. Paulillo got 2 falls in the finals, and I just think she's going to be able to tell where she is right now. She's had some good tournaments on the folk style scene, had a good tournament at Super 32 where she beat 2 Who's Number 1 competitors in the backside and then was able to get 3rd place. But I thought she looked good at this tournament. She made the team at 73 kilograms. Anyone that stood out to you in the U17 division?
Yeah, I mean, I thought, Julia Horger, had a tough, really wrestled Turner tough. Turner was down, but then came back and, won. I forget what the final score. She won by four points, something like that. But Horger wrestled her tough and then wound up taking 6th place. But that's a name that wasn't really as much on my radar. Good comeback by Turner to win that and then, win the tournament. That was just, something that was a little surprising to me,
Sarissa Tucker lost her 2nd match and then came all the way back. Ended up getting 3rd place. Goes 9-1 in the tournament. So Sarissa Tucker, she had a forfeit in there. So I mean, we're gonna throw that in on the wins because it does count. But 9-1, and that's a lot of matches to go to a tournament in 2 days and get 3rd place. So congratulations to her.
That's phenomenal, and it's very difficult to do. And another person, I'm going back to U23s for a second, where Savannah Cosme got upset in the 2nd round, was dominating the match, and then gave up an arm throw, and then got bar armed actually and stuck. But then she won, I think, 6 or 7 on the backside to take 3rd. So I know I'm backtracking, but that just reminded me of that. It just shows you though in freestyle, the beauty of freestyle is that girl was down 8-0, and then wound up, getting a throw and didn't get the fall from the throw, which is what's crazy. But you're never out of a match in freestyle. And I think it's important that athletes realize that, that's why sometimes you'll see coaches challenge stuff. You say, why they challenge it? The person's getting killed, and it matters. But anybody that comes back after losing and wins the whole backside, it's hard, very difficult to do, especially in these large brackets.
Again, Scott, here's the theme: 65 kilos, U17, best of 3 finals. Riley Hanrahan wins the first match against Violet Leisure, 10-0. Comes back, a dogfight. Leisure gets the win, 11-9 in the 2nd match, and then gets a 15-4 tech. So if you would just want to talk about the pendulum absolutely swinging, that's it. It goes this way right into the center, 11-9, and then it swings the other way. That's the beauty of best of 3. We talked about that. That's why you like these series to decide it.
We do, and what's also crazy is, like, just as a spectator sometimes, and I think I have some knowledge of the sport, and I'll watch and I'll see somebody result, and then you'll see like literally 28 minutes later the exact opposite result, and you're like, how did that just happen? Just the adjustments people make, whether it's the athlete, the coach, maybe they just didn't feel they were nervous and they got the nerves. I don't know, but it's sometimes the results are shocking. It doesn't even make sense when you're looking at it. But I do like the 2 out of 3 format for sure.
2 final thoughts. First one is corner coaching is different than coaching in the room, and you just see that play out. And I just notice you'll have 2 or 3 coaches, and they're all yelling at the same time, and I'm listening to it. I wonder how the athlete actually absorbs what's being told, because if you're hearing all these voices, 2-on-1, watch this, or make sure you stay low, or post the arm, whatever it is, and if you're just yelling it nonstop and you're hearing all these different voices, I wonder how effective that is. And then the other thing too is when you're giving advice, I saw a lot of good coaches do this, is only one person should be toweling down and the other person should be giving advice.
Unless the athlete like wants both of them giving advice. So as you get higher level, the athletes tend to, you know, athletes will tell Coach Steiner, like, this is what I want in my corner, especially if they don't, let's say, train with the coach. I think the number one, and you'll see there's less screaming in general as you go up levels. There's a tendency for the younger athletes, for the coaches to like literally try to narrate what they should be doing in the match. And just like athletes get better, coaches need to learn and coach better in terms of not overdoing it. It's very confusing for the athletes when multiple voices are screaming, and it's very confusing when the coaches are screaming constantly and a million things. They can't process it. But it is athlete dependent. Some athletes don't mind that. Some athletes hate it. I think in general, the less is probably better. And because you want to be that when the coach says something, it's heard because they're not screaming every 5 seconds. So it stands out. Over the years, when I did a little coaching, you have to learn how to get better at that. The tendency is too much, and that's not good. And it is confusing. And then you have athletes that say they basically can tone everything out. They're not even hearing anything. They're just like in the moment and focusing. So it really is different on the coach, the athlete. In general, I think one voice and less is better. And I agree with you completely in the between periods that there should be one person giving instruction.
And just as an example, I did see that with Gary Mayab and Tanya Verbeek. Gary Mabb's telling down, Tanya Verbeek giving the instructions, and Gary Mabb didn't say anything. He's just there as a support role to get the athlete ready. And saw that with a couple other ones too. I'm not saying that they're the only ones that do that, but I just think it's a good formula.
Unless and it doesn't mean that it's so set in stone that there can't be something that's a very important point that the main coach that's talking to the athlete missed, and the person tallying like right at the end wants to say something. I mean, there's no perfect way to do it, and it really is dependent on the athletes and the coaches. But in general, less is probably better. And by the time the athlete's out there, being aware of something, you can adjust it, but you're not going to like, I hate when I see like an athlete, like a coach, like trying to teach between periods. That's done in the preparation. It's very hard to teach somebody something or how to stand or where to reach, in the middle. You want to explain what the opponent's doing. But again, as you get higher level, there's less talk, I think, between periods.
And you're in a fragile state, so it's hard to absorb all that in 30 seconds. You got to just get high points and get them
There's
up
a
to the
lot.
mat.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. It's very interesting though how you'll hear athletes and they'll say when they tell you after a match what they actually heard is kind of interesting. It could be some random fan screaming something out. It could be the other coach. It could be their coach. It's funny at what gets absorbed and what sinks in. So, but a lot I've heard from many athletes is very confusing when they're just being constantly screamed at by multiple voices, especially.
Thought number two, final thought. Sarah Hildebrandt, she had her opportunity to be there as a coach, Olympic gold medalist. She got bombarded with picture requests, and I couldn't be happier about that. It was so cool to see girls coming up all the time wanting pictures with Sarah Hildebrandt. That's what we need. There's only 4 Olympic gold medalists in the United States. She's one of them. She's one of the most recent, along with Mead Elor. I loved it.
Yeah, it's great. I remember you telling me she was swarmed at the airport like a rock star, and people asking for autographs. It's good. It's good to hear. Um, and she is a rock star in our world. Just want to add before we close this out, Kyle, if you're playing out, European Championships are starting. Well, some of the brackets, 62 is a beast weight. We'll talk about that in next week's show a little bit. I think there's some points that might be interesting. So if anybody wants to wake up in the middle of the night, I think tonight's a men, but I'm not sure exactly what day the women are, but this is a really good tournament, European Championships for women. Some of the younger athletes, if you wake up and you don't know what to do in the middle of the night, you might want to put on FloWrestling and try to catch some of it.